Is Marvel in trouble? No, at least not in the ways that this Variety article that came out last week is trying to tell us. And I don't want to come on here and just give some commentary and complain about Variety or Marvel. So I want to do a couple of things in this video. I want to talk about what Variety said and what I think my problem with their article is. But then I also want to talk about what I think the real reasons behind Marvel's issues are right now, and also some solutions that either Disney can take care of, Marvel can take care of, or audiences can participate in as well. So if you did not read the Variety article or any of the things that kind of supplementary came off of that, let me just run down some of the things that they said are Marvel's problems, why they're in trouble. The first being that Jonathan Majors, who is in a huge court case battle right now for domestic violence, even if he is innocent, he has kind of left Marvel in a weird place. They don't know what to do with his casting, and he's supposed to be involved majorly for years to come. The other thing that includes the Marvels, which for reference, I'm making this video before the Marvels has come out. I did not go to a press screening, but for the Marvels, there were a lot of lengthy reshoots, which we'll get to that. And then the director, Nia DaCosta, that she ended up leaving the project early, or at least splitting her time in post-production of the Marvels with another project. They talked about there's just too much stuff, specifically superhero stuff, between Marvel and DC and anywhere else. There's just a lot of the same genre right now that is gonna come up later, I promise. Also, the moving of release dates. I think the Marvels had a release date moved multiple times, which I don't think is a huge problem. I think that that is just a piece of the writers and actors strikes that have been going on this year. Again, we're gonna get to here. Rushed VFX, expensive budgets, movies being rewritten consistently, including Blade, which still being announced years ago does not have a script. The idea that they possibly want to bring back Scarlett Johansson and Robert Downey Jr. and kind of have a hard relaunch of the MCU. Those are all the things that are in the Variety article, or all the main points that are in the Variety article. Here's a bit of my rebuttal. As far as there being like too much stuff and rushed VFX, things like that, I completely agree. I think that that is a huge problem. Overinflated budgets for things. There's really no need to spend $25 million per episode on She-Hulk when you're putting it out on Disney Plus and people are only paying like $10 a month to watch it. There's nothing wrong with doing a show that costs $10 million for the whole show or $25 million for the whole show. There's nothing wrong with trying to experiment with less visual effects and focusing more on just conversations, things like that. The things that I think I get drawn to in the MCU, and let me just give my viewpoint here for a second. The things that I love about the MCU are not these big giant fights. Yes, they're fun, but I really love these small character moments, the moments where people get to confess things, the conversation that Thor and Rocket have on that ship, that they tell each other's backstories, those kinds of moments, those character building moments that give them so much depth. Those are the things that I love in the comics. And so those are the things that I'm naturally going to love in the films and the TV shows. Those don't cost a lot in visual effects. But I also want to talk about this bit about the director splitting her time between projects. There are two other examples that I can think of that kind of make this null and void. The first being Tim Burton, who did not direct A Nightmare Before Christmas, but he is a part of it. His name's a part of it as being a producer, but he didn't really spend a lot of time on that production and instead put good people in charge of that production so that he could go off and direct Batman Returns. But like good people were in charge of it enough to where Nightmare Before Christmas is now this super huge cult classic that people love. The more famous of the two examples is Steven Spielberg, who split his time between doing Jurassic Park and Schindler's List, two films that did not suffer for him splitting his time, and ultimately two of his best films to ever come out. So this idea that Nia DaCosta gave up on the Marvels or something like that because she was splitting her time during post-production. It's just a silly argument. And then the lengthy reshoots that are going on and the pushed movie dates, that comes from a much larger issue that's going on in Hollywood. That's not a Marvel problem. It's an entertainment problem. It's a film production problem. The writer's strike and the actor's strike that's taken a large chunk out of this year has really pushed a lot of movie dates back, a lot of release dates back, and they've put a lot of issues on the audience as far as audiences not knowing when movies come out anymore. But that isn't the fault of Marvel. It's just a problem across Hollywood in general. I blame the studios, I blame Disney, and Bob Iger for allowing this to continue as long as it has, but I don't put that on Marvel specifically. I also think that the issue with Jonathan Majors comes in 2 points. One, you can roll the dice and gamble with him, innocent until proven guilty. Even though cancel culture exists, I don't think that cancel culture matters in the long run. So many actors in Hollywood have baggage that we just look past, that people just kind of give up on. They could take that gamble with Jonathan Majors if they'd like to. He could become a huge problem for them down the line, but currently I don't see him as a major problem until maybe his court case is over, and then maybe they want to continue, which does postpone any productions going forward once the actor's strike ends. The other thing that they can do, because yeah, they've done it before, is just recast the character. It would be really easy to recast Kang because he can kind of be anyone or anything. I think that we are, as the audience, going to be okay. We're already saying in our heads, you know, we're pretending that superheroes exist and they shoot laser beams from their eyes and there's a whole multiverse. So why can't I pretend that Kang can look like a different person? Let the audiences just do that. I'll also say this. Personally, have there been a ton of misses from the MCU in the past couple of years? I think so. Secret Invasion, I didn't even finish the show. I didn't want to finish the show. Quantumania, Ant-Man is like my favorite character in the MCU, and Quantumania was a bit of a letdown, to the point where I made a video about Ant-Man and it just tanked because nobody wanted to watch anything that had to do with Ant-Man. When you talk about like the hits and misses of the MCU, I think you have to go back to the beginning. How many people hated Thor, the first film, and Thor Dark World? How many people don't even remember that Edward Norton was the Incredible Hulk? And Iron Man 2 was lauded as one of the worst in the MCU. And that's like early phase 1. Yes, did the MCU get better over time? Of course, because they figured out what characters they needed to work with and what characters they needed to fix over time. The last few years after Endgame, phases 4 and 5 have been a restart of the MCU. And we've needed to figure out what characters work, what characters don't, and where to pivot those characters so that they do work within the stories that are being told. Like, this isn't weird news that like some things are going to be hit or miss, especially when you're putting out so much stuff. But there's so much to love about the MCU recently. I've loved the special presentations. Werewolf by Night is one of my favorite things I've ever seen out of Marvel. I loved the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special. I loved the third Guardians of the Galaxy movie. I'm actually super pumped to see the Marvels because I enjoyed Miss Marvel so much. WandaVision was great. Loki is continuing to be great on television, and I hope that they have seasons and seasons of that show going forward because it's so fantastic. I think that there are some real issues, though, that Variety never really brings up. One of them being a key factor right now, the economy and the price of just going to the movies. It's easy for me as a single person to buy a ticket for $12 to go see the Marvels, but to bring a family of 4 or even to go on a date night where you're going to buy some sodas and a popcorn and make it a whole thing, it becomes really expensive, and people just don't have the money right now. So they're picking and choosing what films they're going to see. If you look at the box office of the last few years, it's easy to see that even now when like the box office is getting slightly better, it's not where it was in 2019 or 2018, and it's not going to be. The movies that are in the top 10 of the last few years have still been some of the Marvel movies. but they're not making $1 billion each because economically, we just aren't there yet as an entire world, especially in America. I'll also say that I think Marvel has done a bad job at giving the audience the perception that they can kind of jump into these stories at any point. A lot of the films have moments where they catch you up on a character's story and all the things that they've done previously, but Marvel doesn't really ever do that. The audience kind of believes, and people do believe going into like the Marvels, that they need to watch the first Captain Marvel, and that they need to watch WandaVision, and that they need to watch Miss Marvel or Secret Invasion. And I don't think that you need to. You can go into this movie and enjoy it. Will your enjoyment be deepened if you've seen those things? Yes. But I think that Marvel needs to make it clear, just like with the comics, there are points where you can jump into these stories and enjoy them from that point onward. But I also think from the audience point, I think that there are so many of these like MCU clowns and all of these people that just want to take something that's popular and give such a hot take just to get clicks and just to get watch time on YouTube or TikTok or wherever on social media. And they give their hot takes and they do it and people listen to that. And if you listen to it enough, you start to believe that kind of stuff. At the same time, we've put so much focus. The Marvels in particular, I'll give that as another example because it's coming out now. The pre-sales for the Marvels have not been great. Box office predictions for the Marvels has not been great. But we put so much emphasis on what the first opening weekend of a film does. We put so much emphasis on what the pre-sales do that we judge a film before it's even been out. And I think that that's crazy. I think that we are dooming films from good people, good directors, good actors, based on statistics that we see on Facebook or Instagram or X or whatever. It's such a bummer to see that. We saw that with Elemental. Elemental was written off. People were like, Pixar is in its flop phase now. But over time, Elemental started to gain some ground because the people like me who did go see that film praised it, and it started to gain some momentum. And I think that people need to give films chances. They need to let them live through their theatrical run and find their audience, or realize that they're not going to be a major hit right off the bat. Again, that might go back to the economics talk. And I think that Hollywood in general has just not done well with marketing their films. They've not done well with good publicity, certainly not with the strikes that have gone on. And so people don't want to give the benefit of the doubt to big companies like Marvel, Disney, or Universal, or Warner Brothers, or whomever, because they see them as the villain, which I'm not saying that they're not, but they're not just villainizing the company, they're also villainizing the directors and the actors and all the people behind the scenes that are working on these films. I know I've gone on for a while complaining, so I want to give some solutions as to what I think actually will work. And one thing that I think Marvel is going to be doing is this Marvel Spotlight, which hopefully they advertise it better than what they already have. They have a lot of time to get to that point, so I hope that they do, which is starting with Echo, and it's going to be this idea that any Marvel Spotlight show recognizes that this is a good starting point to get into the MCU. You do not need previous information to get into these shows or films. I think that that's great, and I think that they need to do more of that. Let people know that they can kind of jump in a lot of points. We talked about this on the podcast that goes up on Patreon. Joe and I do a podcast every week on Patreon, if you didn't know, for a few bucks a month. And we talked about maybe having, even in the films, a small piece before the films that's like a previously on, so that you just kind of give people these 2 or 3 minute clip shows in order to let them know where these characters have been, where they've gone. There's nothing wrong with that. We see that all the time in television. Why not do it for all the TV shows from Marvel and all the films from Marvel? I also think that, like in Phase 1, Marvel needs to pivot. The Spotlight idea is a great idea, but they also need to recognize that some of these characters just aren't for massive audiences. So don't make stuff for them for massive audiences. Give them smaller budget shows on Disney Plus or special presentation 45-minute runs on Disney Plus and let them live there. And focus on the characters that people have shown up to the theater for. Focus on the characters that people do spend their time watching the Disney Plus shows. And focus in on those. Pivot and allow the audience to kind of dictate where they want to see the MCU go. And I think that also says that there's no need to announce what the next phase is 4, 5, 6 years out. Like, yes, you're getting people excited in that moment. You're getting a big, piece of buzz on social media, but at the same time, the follow through on that just is absolutely impossible. And that's why they're going through so many rewrites and so many delays and things like that, because you cannot predict what's going to happen in 4, 5, 6 years. You're best to just preview the films that you have in post-production and maybe the films that are already in production or pre-production that you know are going to get started to film soon. You announce those. Don't announce 4 or 5 years out. Don't get people excited for things that you cannot guarantee will happen as you say that they are going to happen. I also think one of the biggest downfalls of Disney's ownership of things, whether that's Marvel or Star Wars or the Muppets or whatever, is that they've not allowed people to come in and give their vision of a story. Don't be so formulaic. Don't stick to a certain look and branding of these characters. The reason why people love Thor Ragnarok is because Taika Waititi came in and gave it his vibe, his idea. And I think that more of that needs to happen with the MCU, especially if you're going to hire some of these people who are kind of in their own niche and category as directors and writers. Like, allow them to take the characters where they want to take them, in the same way that the comics allow different writers and artists to adapt the characters in their own way. I don't think that that's a bad vision. And in fact, what DC is doing with their idea to kind of have these Elseworlds and to have different visions and ideas of characters based on what directors or writers want to do, I think that's fantastic. And I don't see why Marvel couldn't do kind of the same thing. And the last thing that I'll say that I do agree with the Variety article on is that less is more. And I think that's across the board in Hollywood right now. The idea that every streaming service always has to have a new show or has to have a new movie so that they can keep your, a monthly billing cycle going is just insane to me. There's so much stuff coming out all the time that I almost get so overwhelmed that I stop watching things. And I've gone months at a time without watching anything new because there's just too much stuff and I don't know what to focus on, so I don't focus on anything. Less is more. Give these things medium-sized budgets, give the VFX people enough time to do their jobs, give the writers, the directors, actors enough time to do their jobs, and make something that is worth putting out instead of just putting out more and more stuff. I think that the Variety article nailed that. I do think the Variety article should not be taken as the word of God in the same way that quite a few weeks even before this Variety article came out, a New Yorker piece about Hasan Minhaj came out, which said that all of his stories from stand-up are false to some degree. And he came out in a video and made a rebuttal that, yes, he accentuates some of those stories. He embellishes them a little bit, but they are true stories and there are things that have happened to him. A lot of storytellers do that. And it's not weird or wrong of him to have done that, but because of that, he lost the potential to get a job as the host of The Daily Show, and his reputation was tarnished, and then The New Yorker had to backtrack on some of the things that they had said. Don't believe everything that you're reading, even if it's coming from major magazines and newspapers like The New Yorker or Variety. These things are just op-ed pieces from people who believe things that they're told from certain people in the industry. The Variety article doesn't show the whole picture of what's going on. The MCU is not in trouble. Hollywood is in trouble, and it does need to pivot and it does need to change. They need to pay their actors and writers more, and they're working on that. It's a slow process, but it's happening. So with that being said, I would love to know your thoughts. Give them down below on if you think Marvel's in trouble, what you'd like to see from them, where you think they've gone wrong, and what you think some of the issues in the larger Hollywood scene are. I'd love to know your thoughts. And if you love this kind of commentary video that's a little bit more unscripted from me, let me know. I would love to do more of these. They're a lot of fun to kind of just give my thoughts on something. In the meantime, thank you for watching, my friends, and as always, keep moving forward. Hey, last thing before we go, I have a bunch of videos that I talk about Marvel in, and for whatever reason, people just don't ever know that, but I have a lot of different videos about Marvel, so if you want to learn more about some of these characters or some of my thoughts on these characters, check out the playlist below. Okay, now I'm gonna go. Bye, everybody.